What is the value of a home run? How the run expectancy matrix explains how baseball is played today. The answer is 1.39 runs. On the surface, that probably doesn't seem quite right to you. Isn't it however many runs scored when that home run was hit? Take a grand slam. That's worth 4 runs, right? However, if you think about it for a second, wouldn't some of those runs have scored anyways? Ground ball up the middle, sac fly, single, double, triple. A whole bunch of other events would have scored runs too. So the real question becomes, how many additional runs did that home run actually create? That is where we get the 1.39 runs. Across all home runs hit from the 2021 to the 2024 season, a home run created 1.39 runs. Why do we care about this? Doesn't RBIs correctly assign credit for how many runs that batter created? Not quite. As we mentioned before, those 4 runs were context dependent. Most likely some of those runs would have scored anyways. And the batter got lucky coming up in a bases loaded situation. So how do you separate the batter's contribution from the situation and the luck? We use run values to answer that question. If our ultimate destination is to measure the value of an individual player, we're going to need some coordinates to get there. These coordinates come in the form of run values. They are approximations of what individual events in baseball are worth, that when combined together, give us a direction towards the value of that player. And before people jump on me in the comments, I want to emphasize that these are approximations, specifically averages. There are many situations where the particular event is worth more or less than the value we are going to assign it. By using the average, we get a general heading, which helps us achieve our destination of finding true value. So back to our grand slam situation. How many runs are expected to score when the bases are loaded? To answer the question of what is the value of a home run, we must first look at something called the run expectancy matrix. This is a major building block for understanding how individual events affect innings, games, and therefore seasons. It allows us to set the context of the situation and correctly measure the value of an event. Think of it like the stars in the sky for a navigator. In order to know where we are going, we must first know where we are. The run expectancy matrix is our map. To do that, we're going to use something called run expectancy. Essentially, this is a fancy way of saying average. If we ask the question, what is the run expectancy of the bases loaded with nobody out? The answer is the average number of runs that score from that situation to the end of the inning. We call this our run expectancy for that state. In a half inning of baseball, there are 24 different states. These 24 states combine 3 possible out situations with 8 possible base runner combinations. These are all 24 states. Every half inning starts in the nobody on and nobody out state, and then progresses through any number of additional states until it reaches the end state of 3 outs. And so for each of these 24 states, we can assign a run expectancy. How many runs we expect to score from when that state happens. How do we calculate this? It's easier to understand with an example. Let's use this half inning from this year's Dodgers vs. Mets playoff series. The inning starts, as does every inning, in a nobody on, nobody out state. This goes on our tracker of states for this half inning.
He's going to conduct a very good at bat. That's a nice swing right there. I just think he has the ability to drive and a run.
We then transition to a man on first, nobody out state with the Teoscar Hernandez single. We add that to our states for the inning. Basically, every time we visit a new state, we're going to add it to our tracker. But if that state is already on our board, we don't need to add it again.
Against only 2 in his first start. Edman drives this ball deep left center field. Back goes Nimmo. Clean up Tommy Edman. A 2-run blast.
So now, the following batter, Tommy Edman, hits a 2-run home run. This earns 2 runs for every state that's on our board. Essentially, when runs score, we add it to every state that is already on the board. So this is now our running total. And now we just proceed to do this for the rest of the half inning. Following the home run, we're back in the nobody on, nobody out state. And we don't add it again because it's already on our board.
With runners in scoring position. Once he takes the walk, shows off that patience. Down to Kenny.
The next batter, Max Muncy, walks, again putting us in the man on first, nobody out state.
Sean Manaea. There goes Max Muncy before the first pitch from Phil Maton, which misses everything. Muncy gets second easily.
There is a pass ball, which then puts us on the man on second, nobody out state, which we add to the board. But now, there's no runs because nobody has scored since this was added to the board.
Hernandez lifts a fly ball to left field. Nimmo over to his right. Make the grab for the first out. Because the longer this state.
Next, Kike Hernandez strikes out, which transitions us to the man on second, 1 out state.
Fly to right. Marte's there. 2 out.
Andy Pages also flies out, which transitions us to the man on second, 2 out state. Adding all of these to the board.
Smith whips a high drive to center field. Taylor back. It is gone.
Next, Will Smith comes up and hits a 2-run home run. So now, we add these 2 runs to every state on the board. Remember, we're trying to do this because we're trying to track the number of runs that score from when that state first appeared on our board to the end of the half inning. The home run has now put us in the nobody on, 2-out state. Add it to the board.
Now it's Taylor sending a fly ball deep the other way. Marte to the track. He's got room.
Finally, Chris Taylor flies out and puts us in the final 3-out state. So if we compile all of the states we saw in the inning, this is what we end up with. So the run expectancy for this individual half inning was 4 runs for the nobody on, nobody out state. So if you do this for every half inning for the 2021 to the 2024 season, and then average out the number of runs scored for each state, you get that state's run expectancy. So given no other information, how many runs would we expect to score for these states? So take the nobody on, nobody out state, the starter state for every half inning. From 2021 to 2024, every time we hit this state, we expect 0.497 runs to score. So essentially, for every half inning, because they all start in that nobody on, nobody out state, we expect 0.5 runs to score. Do this for all 24 base out states and you get this. So going back to the example we started this all with, a grand slam. So with no outs, bases loaded, we expect 2.34 runs to score. How many runs did that home run actually contribute versus the 2.34 runs on average we expected to score anyways? Why do we need context? This will start to form the basis for how we give credit to individual events and eventually individual players. Let's start by using the same approach we used for the base out states. We're going to measure the number of runs that score from right before that event to the end of the half inning. And then by averaging all those numbers, this will give us the run value for that event. Essentially, we're trying to discover how many runs we can expect from each event. We get a table like this. A home run is worth 1.9 runs, a triple 1.6, a double 1.3, a walk 0.8. However, if you look at that table again, it gets back to the problem we started with. We're looking at these values without context. Look at the outs again. Our previous run expectancy table shows us that for each out, our run expectancy goes down. However, this table is saying our run expectancy goes up by 0.2. We're going to have to look at these events in the context with which they happen. So how do we use our base out states to put these events in context? What we need to do is subtract the starting run expectancy from those run values we created. This will give us a better look at how many runs that event actually created. Looking at our table now, this lines up much better with our intuition. On average, an out is costing us 0.27 runs. However, this still isn't the full story. Here are the values for a home run in each of the 24 base out states, including the run expectancy before that home run was hit. We're going to subtract out the run expectancy before that home run was hit from our average run value to give us the runs created. However, when you look at that table, look at the home runs with nobody on. Why is it more than 1 run? Based on our new context-dependent calculation, shouldn't it be exactly 1 run? Turns out, when calculating the run value this way, there's some error from averaging out all the different variations of the situation happening in real life. What we need to do is compare the run expectancy state before the event happened to the run expectancy state after. This would allow us to accurately capture the change in run expectancy from that event. So let's do this with an example. So you go from a man on first and second and no outs, a run expectancy of 1.47, to a man on first and third with no outs and a run expectancy of 1.85. We can then award the runs created as the increase in run expectancy from our starting state to our end state. So for this situation, it would be 1.85 minus 1.47 for a run value of 0.37. So after the event, our run expectancy increased by 0.37 runs. So we can say that event created 0.37 runs. But in this situation, that man on second also scored. So we need to add the runs that actually scored during the event to the increase in run expectancy for our final run value. So for this situation, that event had a run value of 1.37. So if we use that same approach for all of the home run values that we were looking at before, we get this table. So looking at the table now, we can see all the home runs with nobody on are worth exactly 1 run. There is a small amount of variation, but we're not launching rockets, so we're okay with that. So we're almost there. Now, repeat this process for every event that happened from 2021 to 2024, and you get the final run value table for those seasons. And looking at this final table now, the modern game of baseball starts to take form. What do the run values tell us? First, you can probably see why sacrifice bunts are so rare now. On average, they are actually costing you runs. There are some exceptions, and if you're interested in that, please read this book. They dedicate an entire chapter to those exceptions. But on average, sack bunts are not a wise decision. Outs cost you runs. For every out, you can expect less runs to score, which leads us to the second thing. An out is an out. There really isn't a huge difference between an out and a strikeout. They both cost you on average about the same amount of runs. And you probably noticed this, where sluggers are striking out at a much higher rate than before. Look at guys like Kyle Schwarber and Brent Rooker, who are striking out in about 30% of their at-bats. However, they're still valuable because they are contributing runs in all of these other different ways. So the question then becomes, how do we calculate how much value they are actually creating? And I will caveat by saying this, a high strikeout rate isn't always a good thing, and if they aren't producing runs in any of these other forms, it's probably an indication of a bigger issue with their swing or their approach. Back to our question, how do we use this table to measure the amount of runs created by individual players? If we go back to the Moneyball era, one of the first ways they did this was with on-base percentage, because on-base percentage is a good proxy for your out rate. And remember, we said every out costs you runs. On-base percentage is basically a measure of the rate at which you aren't creating outs. And this is the reason on-base percentage became a much better measure of a player's value versus batting average. Because say you got a guy with a 400 on-base percentage but is hitting 200 versus a guy with a 300 batting average but with a 350 on-base percentage. The guy with a 350 OBP is still creating more outs than the guy who was hitting 200. Therefore, the guy who's hitting 200 but with a 400 on-base percentage is creating more runs than the 300 hitter. So these are our coordinates. From there, we can start plotting our direction towards player value, which, if we're trying to answer the question, how many runs did this individual player create? We can use those run values to create a better statistics. And that's how you end up with WOBA and WRC+. It's because they measure the amount of runs created. So that's why in our next video, we're going to explore WOBA and WRC+ and what they tell us about individual players. As always, thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Disclaimer, nothing below is necessarily new. This is an attempt to recreate the run expectancy section from the book by Tom Tango, Michael Lickman, and Andrew Dolphin, using data from the 2021 to 2024 seasons. Please read their book for a much better explanation of this and many other really cool concepts. All credit goes to them.